At 2 o'clock in the morning, the city of Caracas remained tucked under a heavy blanket of Caribbean humidity, unaware that the world was about to change forever. To any observer standing on a balcony overlooking the capital, the sky appeared as a vast, empty void, decorated only by passing clouds and the distant glimmer of stars. However, within the invisible layers of the electromagnetic spectrum, the atmosphere was filled with the frantic energy of a digital war already in progress. Deep within the command centers of the Russian-made air defense systems, known as the S-300VM batteries, radar operators sat in a state of misplaced calm. They had been assured by their commanders and foreign advisors that they were protected by an impenetrable iron dome, a system capable of tracking an object as small as a golf ball from over 100 miles away. They believed their S-300VM units could swat any incoming threat out of the sky before it even reached the city limits. They were convinced the Americans would never dare to cross their borders so boldly. But their assumptions were based on a reality that had already ceased to exist. High above the cloud layer, undetected by the aging logic of the defensive radar, the air was populated by ghosts. U.S. Navy EA-18G Growlers, launched from the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, were soaking the frequency bands with a sophisticated layer of white noise. This was not a blunt jammer meant to trigger alarms. It was a subtle digital fog designed to mask the arrival of the wolves. The silence of the night was shattered by a technological precision that the defenders never even saw coming. At 1 minute past 2 o'clock in the morning, the sky seemingly tore open, though the sound was not the traditional roar of engines, but a sharp, rhythmic tearing like heavy canvas being ripped apart. This sound was immediately followed by the jarring vibration of the earth as multiple precision strikes impacted their targets simultaneously. The Generalissimo Francisco de Miranda Air Base, located in the heart of La Carlota, was effectively neutralized in a sequence of blinding flashes that illuminated the valley. The famous S-300 batteries, once the pride of the national defense, never even managed to fire a single interceptor. Before the radar operators can even register a contact on their flickering displays, an AGM-88G Advanced Anti-Radiation Missile had already locked into their active emitters and followed the beam directly to its source. The screens went dark the moment before the command trailers were consumed by the force of the impact. Within a mere 20 minutes, the network that was supposed to be the most sophisticated air defense system in South America had been reduced to smoldering wreckage and scrap metal. This was not a standard air raid intended to destroy buildings. It was a surgical door-kicking operation designed to announce a new presence. What followed through the shattered door was not another wave of high-altitude explosives, but a direct and undeniable message to the leadership. As the air defenses crumbled, the focus shifted from the sky to the very heart of the capital city. While the F-35C Lightning II fighters maintained absolute control over the airspace, the true objective of the night was being pursued 50 feet above the jungle canopy and the city rooftops. The pilots of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, famously known as the Night Stalkers, were navigating their MH-60M Blackhawks and MH-47G Chinooks through the urban canyons with eerie silence. Their target was not a military barracks or a fuel depot. It was a set of highly specific coordinates tied to the regime's private rooms. For several years, various intelligence agencies had carefully logged the daily habits and movements of Nicolas Maduro, identifying his safe houses and the hidden bunkers beneath his palaces. On this particular night, the United States military knew exactly where he was resting. The men descending from those helicopters were not standard infantry units. They were Tier 1 operators from Delta Force, trained to execute violence with the precision of a surgeon. As they fast roped into the courtyards and used breaching charges on reinforced entrances, The resistance they encountered was frantic but ultimately ineffective. In the center of Caracas, a deep sense of chaos began to take root as the city's power grid flickered and eventually failed, plunging millions into darkness. The orange glow that residents saw reflecting off the glass of high-rise buildings was not an early sunrise, but the secondary fires of military depots burning on the outskirts of the city. Rumors spread through the darkened streets faster than aircraft could fly, with citizens whispering of invasions, coup, and the possibility of civil war. On military radio bands, confused commanders screamed for orders and reinforcements that would never arrive. They desperately asked for the location of the Air Force and the powerful Su-30 Mk2 flankers that were supposed to defend the nation's honor. There was no response from the air bases because those flankers remained grounded. The runways were cratered and the hangars collapsed under the weight of precision-guided bombs. The U.S. Navy had effectively removed their ability to participate in the conflict before the pilots could even reach their cockpits. It was a brutal demonstration of modern military doctrine. You do not need to fight an enemy's aircraft in the air if you can effectively delete their ability to take off from the ground. The world stood still as the official confirmation of the leader's removal echoed through the global media. The news that eventually broke the silence was not a grainy video or a leaked recording, but an official statement from the United States government that stunned observers across the world. It was announced that Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores had been successfully captured and removed from the country. This operation was not intended as a strike against their lives. It was a physical pickup designed to bring them before a court of law. In a move that defied traditional military expectations, the United States did not simply strike the nation from a distance. They reached into the most heavily fortified location in the country and plucked the head of state right from his home. He was being flown toward international waters before the dust had even begun to settle on the ruins of the S-300 sites. He was indicted, arrested, and physically removed from the board in a single night of high-stakes maneuvering. The regime did not collapse because its entire army had been defeated in a long war. It fell because its central figure had been suddenly and effectively erased from the equation, resulting in a checkmate that took less than 4 hours to complete. Deciphering the success of such an operation requires looking deep into the mechanics of modern dominance. The question of how such a feat was accomplished comes down to the teamwork of 3 specific pillars: intelligence, stealth, and overwhelming force. The intelligence aspect was the foundation of the entire mission. The U.S. military did not guess where the radar batteries were located. They had mapped them with absolute certainty. For months leading up to the raid, drones and surveillance aircraft have been documenting the electronic signature of every defense asset in Venezuela. They knew the exact frequencies of every radar dish and the precise timing of guard rotations. They had even identified a specific technological glitch in the guidance radar that rendered it blind when hit with a specific type of jamming signal. By the time the operation commenced, the enemy's own sensors had been turned into their greatest weaknesses. The stealth component was represented by the F-35C, which acted more as a linked computer network than a traditional fighter jet. These aircraft were able to share targeting data instantly, ensuring that every pilot and every ship at sea saw the battlefield in 4 dimensions. While the Venezuelan operators were attempting to play a standard game of defense, the U.S. Navy was operating on a level of technology that made resistance impossible. Beyond the hardware, this event redefined the boundaries of international power and the safety of those at the top. The successful capture of a head of state sends a huge message to every other authoritarian leader on the planet who might be watching. It serves as a sharp reminder that reinforced bunkers, advanced air defense networks, and geographical distance no longer provide the safe zones they once did. The raid demonstrated a level of global reach that remains unique to the United States military, and the ability to put boots on the ground, secure a high-value target, and vanish back into the night while an entire national military is frozen by air power. As the sun began to rise over Caracas on the 3rd of January, the reality of a new era set in. The streets were not filled with tanks or traditional soldiers, but with an eerie and confused silence as the people realized the revolution had ended, not with a massive battle, but with a single helicopter flight. The military, now leaderless and lacking clear direction, chose to remain in their barracks rather than face an invisible and overwhelming foe. The resulting power vacuum was instantaneous, and while the USS Gerald R. Ford turned back into the wind to prepare for further operations, it was clear the mission had already achieved its primary goal. This operation, which some have called Operation Southern Spear, will likely be analyzed by military historians and war colleges for several decades, and it is proven that in the 21st century the strength of a nation is not measured by the number of tanks it possesses, but by the speed at which it can be blinded and silenced. It demonstrated that even the most praised foreign defense systems are leaky when faced with integrated electronic warfare and stealth technology. The removal of the leadership marks the end of a long and difficult chapter for the nation, but it also signals the beginning of a new global reality where the line between diplomatic pressure and direct action has been completely erased. The rules of engagement have shifted, and the world is now forced to grapple with the implications of a decapitation strike that can reshape a nation in less than the time it takes for a single night's sleep. Was this the correct path to take for regional stability, though? Or does such an action risk opening a box of unforeseen chaos? If you were tasked with the responsibilities of the commander-in-chief, would you have authorized such a high-risk mission? Or would the potential for international backlash and civilian consequences have been too great to ignore? As Venezuela begins the process of rebuilding or faces the risk of breaking apart, the global community must decide how it views this new era of precision power. What do you think? Was this surgical decapitation strike a necessary move to restore regional order? Or is it a dangerous precedent that puts every world leader in the crosshairs of precision power? If you were in the Oval Office, would you have authorized the capture of a sitting head of state? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to dive deeper into the digital fog of the Growlers and the sheer power of the USS Gerald R. Ford, make sure that you check out the links in the description. Stay sharp, watch the skies, carry on.